Get caught in Mexico. How did they even find me in the first place? I was coming back from a concert in a bus stop at a toll booth. Some guy came in asking for ID. I showed him my California ID, but I didn't have my passport. Next thing I knew, I was in a van. I got to the immigration office. They patted me down, took away all my belongings. They looked me up and they saw that I overstayed my 180-day tourist visa. Long story short, they didn't let me leave the immigration office until I bought my ticket to go back to the USA, which is crazy because I already have my dual citizenship in process, but it's not complete yet. That could be why it didn't show up in the system. The closest flight I could get had multiple stops. Before I went to LA, I stopped at Monterrey. I thought it was gonna be a smooth process going back to the United States, but then this happened. I didn't get my little paper stamp that they give you when you enter the country, so I ended up missing my flight. And anyone that overstays their 180 days, you have to pay a fee of 717 pesos, which is $35. But since I'm being kicked out of the country, I didn't have to pay that fee. They got me another multiple stop flight. So it took me 2 more flights before I got back to the United States. Yes. And once I saw the Edgar cuts and the LA outfit, I landed back to the...
Man, sometimes you just look at a news story and think to yourself, wow, that is actually real. Like, you cannot make this up. You cannot script this. This is not some type of elaborate Babylon Bee article. This is indeed a real life development, which is highly ironic given the current context of American politics and the debate over illegal immigration, deportations, and I guess one could say even the broader issue of mass migration itself as a whole. Because today, ladies and gentlemen, we got to give you a new development out of not the nation of America, but the nation of Mexico, where massive protests and in some cases even riots have erupted over the very issue of immigration. Now, you hear that on the surface and probably think to yourself that this might look something similar to the recent anti-ICE protests that you've seen in America, where Mexican people are essentially protesting against the Trump administration policy of returning those illegally in the country back to their countries of origin. But ladies and gentlemen, it is actually the opposite here. The Mexican people in Mexico City and other places over the weekend have apparently taken to the streets. I kid you not. Again, you cannot make this up, to protest against the massive influx of American immigrants into their country. And essentially their grievance here, the reason why they're upset, is largely because in the wake of COVID, obviously American tourism has been a big phenomenon in Mexico for some time, but especially with the new nature of digital nomads, remote people who can come work for American companies but live in a foreign country where the American money goes much, much further. Essentially, they're mad here that the American immigrants are coming into their country, refusing to assimilate, refusing to learn the local language. Isn't that interesting? Not having a lot of respect for the country itself that they're living in. Among other complaints, apparently, the argument here is they're gentrifying the local communities. In other words, erasing the native culture of the country and bringing their own over there. Now, with that said, when you consider here again the current debates in American politics, is this whole story not so ironic? It's kind of interesting. It turns out that other nations do not really like it, first of all, when you have a massive, unsustained, uncontrollable wave of migration that disrupts the native economy, the native populace, etc., etc. But also, number two, especially when those migrants come to your country, oftentimes, in many cases, do not learn the local language, do not assimilate to the local culture, do not really feel that they're a part of the greater nation they're in. They instead form their own national and ethnic enclaves within your nation. Yet, turns out it's not really such a great thing to be dealing with as a country. Now, of course, that begs the question as to the American left, whether they will be coming out and condemning these Mexican protests against American immigrants, because after all, let's remember here that the best nations are, of course, built on immigration. Diversity is our strength. And so surely leftists should be arguing here that the white American tourists and digital nomads and immigrants should be coming to Mexico and surely enriching all of the local culture with their English language and American customs, because after all, that's what it should be all about, right? So anyways, we'll get into it. We'll tell you about this whole story here today because it is truly astonishing, to say the least, in terms of the irony here. With that said, guys, as usual, do us a big favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing here, guys, is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, here is the story, for instance, out of the AP. To give you an idea here again of what these protesters are apparently upset about, They're reporting here that protests against surging mass tourism in Mexico City have ended in vandalism as well as harassment of tourists and some other issues. What are they upset about here again? Well, a protest by hundreds against gentrification and mass tourism that began peacefully on Friday in Mexico City neighborhoods popular with tourists turned violent when, people started smashing storefronts and doing all this different stuff. But again, here, that's not the story here for us really to report. The real question here ought to be, what are they apparently so mad about? Well, this marked a violent end to a more peaceful march throughout the day, calling out the masses of mostly American tourists who have flooded into Mexico's capital in recent years. Now, it's not necessarily even here that the Mexican people are inherently against tourism. They're against the idea of, by the way, we're not just talking about tourism, just to be clear. There's a lot of people who are just basically getting residency visas in Mexico so they can live there long term, enjoy the cheap prices, enjoy just the lifestyle, etc. And again, that's what you're seeing here because tension had been mounting in the city since U.S. American digital nomads flocked to Mexico City in 2020. Many did so to escape coronavirus lockdowns in the U.S., or guess what here, take advantage of the cheaper rent prices in the Latin American city. Now, it's a little bit different, but I guess you could largely make the same argument here. So in other words, what did they come to Mexico for? The economic opportunity. That's what it is, right? The ability to have greater purchasing power, live a better life in the same way that a lot of illegal aliens flood into the U.S. with the prospect of, I want to make money in America to basically send that back home, get more opportunity. That also works in the reverse here, right? As you can see. So that's what they did. Again, so the argument out here ought to be, well, the Americans, guys, are just coming to Mexico looking for a better life. After all, that's what the left says. So really, what should be the problem with it? Now, with that said, look, I want to be clear here to the Mexican people, the Mexican citizens, the legal citizens, native-born citizens, etc. of Mexico, that in the case of their grievance here, their plight, I largely have to sympathize with it, right? I think people in this country, people who are born in this country, really can understand kind of how it feels at the moment to say, hey, you have basically this mass flood of migration that comes in. It's unplanned, unsustained, uncontrollable. They don't assimilate. Gee, I can imagine why that would cause a whole lot of problems. And one could even argue here, right? So this is what people in Mexico are mad about. The issue in America is worse, frankly, than what people in Mexico City are dealing with. And even in this case, it's angry enough. It causes enough problems for them to be not just protesting, but rioting over it. Really makes you have to reconsider the greater issue of illegal immigration itself. But after all, don't be waiting anytime soon for leftists to be coming out and somehow condemning the Mexican protesters here. We know what it's really about, which is, it's basically this narrative in history and modern world politics and everything where, white people in white countries, historically white countries, are the bad guys, the aggressors in it all. And so, if you have a non-white country like Mexico basically making the same exact argument, doing the same exact thing, hey, we want to defend the local culture here. We want to, obviously at that point, it's perfectly okay, right? Yeah, Viva La Raza, that's amazing. But when American people, not even off of the argument of race, a much more benign argument, basically saying here, like, we're against illegal immigration and mass uncontrolled immigration into our country because it causes very similar problems here to what you are describing. People talk about, the rent price is going up. But by the way, the same thing happens in America. Maybe in different ways, but it's still largely true, right? You have the recent phenomenon of a bunch of people come in that raises real estate prices because it drives demand. You have, of course, this issue of a lot of foreign investors from other countries basically coming in and hogging real estate, et cetera, as well. So all of these things contribute to create very similar factors. But again, Americans are the bad guys when they're against this type of stuff, right? It's just so ironic here. As you can see here, right? Since then, rents have soared and locals have gotten increasingly pushed out of their neighborhoods, particularly in areas like Condesa and Roma, lush areas packed with coffee shops and restaurants. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it so interesting that the same thing has happened in the U.S. as a result of mass migration in many, many communities? It's just the simple truth, right? Oh, it's talking here about rent prices going up. Well, I can think of another major time in U.S. history where rent and housing prices shot up through the roof. And guess what? It happened under Joe Biden's presidency, which can be attributed to obviously many different things, COVID, inflation, all that. But it's also worth noting here that despite all of their constant arguments about how illegal mass migration was going to be a good thing for the economy, because after all, as I so often say, like, who's going to do this job or that job? Actually, as a matter of fact, you saw massive increases of those prices, those very prices, at the same exact period where you were letting like something of 10 million people illegally into the country through the southern border. Again, guys, I don't really believe in coincidences, frankly. Nonetheless, you can see here, right? Michelle Castro, a 19-year-old college student, was among the flocks of people protesting. She said she's from the city's working-class city center and that she's watched slowly as apartment buildings have been turned into housing for tourists. Again, guys, so in other words, what you're saying here is a local community that's probably been there for generations. Yeah, the moment that it gets totally taken over by foreigners, they're mad about that? Well, why should you be mad? Again, diversity is our strength. I thought that's what you were saying here, right? So I'm not attacking these protesters, at least the peaceful ones, right, for the cause. I perfectly understand why. But again, to the left, I really wonder how you're going to react to this. Going on here, she says here that, quote, Mexico City is going through a transformation. Really, is that so? There are a lot of foreigners, namely Americans, coming to live here. Isn't that interesting, right? Many say it's xenophobia, but it's not. It's just that so many foreigners have come here. Rents are skyrocketing because of Airbnb. Rents are so high that some people can't even afford to pay anymore. Oh, so what you're saying here is that the argument for controlling a migration crisis is not out of xenophobia. It's not for hatred of the people coming in. Rather, it's for the fact that there's a quality of life, there's a community, there's a standard, there's a national culture, etc., local culture as well, that you want to preserve. And by allowing your area to be overwhelmed by ridiculous numbers of people coming in to where it's unsustainable and they don't even assimilate, and in some cases they just outright become the majority themselves instead, that creates a problem for the people who have lived there for generations. Isn't that so interesting, right? But anyways, there you have it. According here to Sky News, as they're pointing out, tensions have grown across the capital city due to the rising costs, yes, of rent and the reconstruction of old neighborhoods. In other words, they're mad that the old neighborhoods are now starting to look like America instead of Mexico. That's what they're saying. Okay, okay. The old neighborhoods, they have a point perhaps there, by the way. But the old neighborhoods have been swapped out for new developments as the city continues to grow into a tourist hotspot for so-called digital nomads, aka people just looking for a better life. So why shouldn't they all be allowed? Why shouldn't every American who wants to live in Mexico be allowed to do so? Again, economic opportunity. What happened there? But noticeably here, take a listen to these signs during the protest. Signs such as, quote, your new home is an invasion. Your new home is an invasion. Interesting word, right? When I can think of a case where our U.S. president described what was happening to America through America's migration crisis as an invasion, he was lambasted as a xenophobic, evil, racist, terrible person. But of course, when people in Mexico say the same exact thing, they're the good guys here, apparently. Because again, I'm pretty sure that the left is not going to say that these people are bad. Saying here, quote, further, we shouldn't feel like foreigners in our own land. We shouldn't feel like foreigners in our own land. In other words, people shouldn't be coming into our country in overwhelming, unsustainable numbers, refusing to assimilate, etc. And further here saying, quote, expat equals gentrifier were seen. Now, with that said, I want to play a video here of the protests themselves, the interviews, what they were saying. And I think, frankly, I'm just going to make the JD Vance the whole face the whole time, basically just going. Because really, you watch this video, you watch the irony here. By the way, again, totally sympathize with the way these Mexican people feel. But it really does, string some interesting thoughts in your head. Anyways, take a listen.
Also enjoy a cheaper cost of living. Protesters say the newcomers have driven up rents beyond the reach of locals.
If they're going to live in a country, they have to contribute to that country.
JD Vance face right there. If they're going to live in a country, they have to contribute to that country. I can think of a context in another country, say a country to their north where people are called bad and evil for doing it and racist. But in this country, yeah, Mexican culture, that's a good thing. We have to defend it, right?
The first and simplest issue is legal migration. They come here with visas or no visas, and still the change in purchasing power generates these problems of gentrification and
They come here with visas and no visas. In other words, what he's referring to there is a lot of Americans abuse the 6-month tourist visa, stipulation, no tourist visa, basically for 6 months. You can stay as an American citizen in Mexico for 6 months without needing a visa or anything. And many of them just use that as an excuse to live there. Kind of an abuse of tourism, I guess, in their argument. Or furthermore, I don't know, maybe there's even people, I'm not sure, probably not as common as in America, but maybe there's people who overstay the visa and just live there illegally. That's also a possibility I'm open to. But again, the argument here is basically being made, we should remove them, right? We should either, control what's going on, regulate it more, and in the case, yes, that people are here on no visa improperly, they should be deported. Yeah, that's a good point. Fantastic point.
displacement.
I'm here because gentrification is just one more step towards colonization, dispossession, and the exploitation of our resources.
Colonization. In other words, they're going to come here and basically turn it into a thing for themselves. Okay, so that's what happens when you have mass uncontrolled migration without assimilation. Colonization. And the exploitation of our resources. In other words, because they're coming here again to basically enjoy better economic purchasing power. So when you come to another country and basically just use it as an economic zone to enrich yourself in one way or the other, use it for your personal benefit, not out of respect for that nation, and that's basically all you're there for. Heck, maybe, and I'm sure in some cases, you might send something called remittances, right? Money back to your home country or people in your own home country, or in some ways economic benefit there. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That's really a strong argument. I totally support these Mexican protesters in their cause, at least. Like they're completely right. They're making some strong arguments here. It's just very interesting. We'll see if that would be made in the reverse, but
Right now it's about the people, but it won't be long before they run out of oil, water, or lithium in other countries and come and take them from us.
Many Americans in Mexico are able to still receive high salaries in dollars from U.S. companies by working on laptops from their apartments.
The government is directing its public policies towards people with higher purchasing power, often illegally displacing local populations who have lived in these neighborhoods for 40, 50, and we have even documented cases of up to 60 years. In 5 years, rents have increased by 47%. This is violent for the local population. We are debating whether to pay for electricity, water, or food. Of course, we choose.
So, furthermore, the argument here being made is that a policy of mass migration, because, you could make the case that the American tourists are, they're spending more money. If they're living there as digital nomads more than 6 months, they're also paying Mexican taxes. So they're a good thing for the Mexican economy. Okay, so shouldn't that all trickle down? Shouldn't it be back to the citizens? Oh, no, wait, because that's not exactly always how it works. And indeed, yes, the immigration policies of a nation should benefit the native-born citizens of that nation first. If the immigration policy does not actively make life better for the people who were born in the country and already live in the country, maybe that's not a good immigration policy. Huh. Yeah. Good point.
To eat.
Some activists blame Mexico's government for encouraging them. However, there's no simple fix.
For encouraging? Oh, isn't that awesome? Oh, dear.
Imposing tougher visa restrictions on Americans could worsen relations with the U.S. Mexican citizens in the U.S. also send billions of dollars in remittances back to their families in Mexico.
So again, as I brought up before, is that not a situation of basically coming into a country and using it as like an economic zone for their own gain? Yeah, it's like this watching Deja Vu or something.
In a world where travel and communication are faster and easier than ever, these two nations are finding it harder to have neighborly relations. Wilson Dysart, Al Jazeera.
Yeah, so interesting, right? So interesting. So anyways, meanwhile, in other news, as I said before, obviously, understandably and justifiably, okay, the Mexican people are having serious problems with the migration, the uncontrolled migration of foreigners into their country. And keep in mind, right, when they make the arguments, for instance, that the Americans, like, you know, they're raising the rent prices, they don't speak Spanish, they are destroying our local culture, you know, I can think of far worse cases in which a migration crisis could create something even significantly worse than that. Not sure, it's kind of drawing a blank right now. I'm just saying, you know, that's a possibility here, of course, to consider. And, you know, again, totally sympathize with their argument. It is really bad for people to come into your country and essentially impose their foreign culture on the native culture of your own country and loyalty and all that stuff, which of course really begs into question how we ought to feel about, I should say, videos like this out of America, out of our own country, but... But hey, after all, it's good for our economy, so we really shouldn't be complaining about anything, don't you know? Like more people equals good economic growth here, obviously. Of course, you further here have, for instance, this video out of a recent anti-ICE protest and the rhetoric you hear here, saying, for instance, this one black individual goes on to say, quote, "My ancestors were stolen from Africa to come here. Then you stole the land from the indigenous. Stolen people on stolen land. Never forget that. Do not stop coming out." And of course, this is an argument you've heard massively in response to the deportations, basically saying, oh, you know, California used to be Mexico and this is stolen land and nobody's illegal on stolen land.
England will fall. Japan will fall. If America does not stand up right now and say, hey, we don't want this. We will fight and fight and fight and get tear gas, and we'll still come out here today because democracy matters. The truth matters. Justice matters. That's what this country was built on. My ancestors were stolen from Africa to come here. And then you stole the land from the indigenous. So that's stolen people on stolen land. Never forget that. Do not stop coming out.
Nobody's illegal on stolen land. Pretty stupid argument, but I'm not a leftist, obviously, but if I were, and I were a consistent one, no one's illegal on stolen land. What a truly good slogan, frankly, that I think American immigrants ought to be saying to Mexican native citizens there when they immigrate to Mexico. After all, no one's illegal on stolen land, right? Because let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that all this talk about colonialism, despite all of it, that the nation of Mexico, and by the way, all of Latin America, are just as equally a byproduct of former imperialism and colonialism as the United States is, okay? Just ask the Spanish Empire. Look at what they did to the Aztecs and the native population there. Yeah, it was total imperialism, colonization, it was conquest, and newsflash now, the vast majority, almost overwhelmingly, of Latinos living in Mexico are at least on some level Spanish, and so you could always argue they're all the colonizers, right? So really, truly, Mexico stolen land as well. So again, surely I cannot wait for all of these leftists to come out and condemn the protest that took place in Mexico City over the weekend for these very reasons. Oh wait, that won't be happening. And we know why that won't be happening. But anyways, there you have it, guys. Just wanted to share this story here with you today because I truly do think it encapsulates just so much. It's one of those things, like, I don't even have to say much more, okay? I don't think I should have to explain it all those many times or that clearly. It's like, it just speaks for itself, really, really. But anyways, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.